This story is titled, My Wife Said to Just Forget About It and Everything Will Be Fine. So I decided to forget not only what she did, but her too, and handed her divorce papers. Hey Reddit, I'm 29 years old, and I found myself sitting at my kitchen counter last night, staring blankly at the wood grain patterns on the surface. My coffee had gone completely cold, leaving a perfect ring stain on the marble countertop. I hadn't touched it once. Couldn't make sense of anything that was happening around me. That's when I heard her keys jingling in the front door. I didn't bother looking up. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor with that sharp, rehearsed rhythm I'd grown to recognize. Diana never used to wear heels unless we were going out together for something special. Now they clicked constantly, keeping time with the rhythm of another life entirely. One I wasn't invited to be part of. Her hair was curled in that artificial salon way that looks perfect but feels cold. Her makeup was flawless, like she hadn't just finished what she claimed was a grueling 12-hour shift at work. Everything about her appearance contradicted the exhaustion she'd been describing to me for weeks. She walked into the kitchen and paused, and I could feel her scanning the room, calculating her next move. I still didn't lift my head from the counter. I didn't need to look at her to know the exact expression she was wearing. I'd seen that same guilty face before when she dented my truck and tried to convince me the damage was already there. It was the same calculated silence, the same nervous adjustment of her purse strap, followed by the same fake calm in her voice when she finally spoke. "Didn't expect you to be awake," she said, as if my presence in my own kitchen was somehow inconvenient. I finally looked up at her. "Yeah, well, I didn't expect you to be out either." Her blink was quick and controlled, almost impressively so. She stepped past me like I was just background noise, barely worth acknowledging. "It was Rebecca's birthday," she said without looking back. "I told you about it." "No, you didn't," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "You said you had a project deadline to meet." There was another pause, but not a long one. Diana had always been quick on her feet when it came to covering her tracks. "Oh, right, that's what I meant," she said smoothly. "Rebecca asked me at the last minute to join them. I figured you'd be sleeping anyway, so I didn't want to wake you. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from lack of sleep. It comes from sitting in the same room as someone who's lying directly to your face while believing they're doing it skillfully." That bone-deep tiredness settled into me as I listened to her casual deception. I stood up quietly from the counter, not saying anything else. The silence between us felt heavy and loaded with unspoken truths. I walked calmly to the hallway closet and opened the door, reaching inside to pull out a small black gift bag, one that I had carefully resealed with tape after discovering it earlier. I placed it on the counter between us like a piece of evidence in a courtroom, letting it speak for itself. Diana stopped mid-step when she saw the bag. Her eyes flicked from the bag to me, then back to the bag again. She said absolutely nothing, but I could see the wheels turning in her head as she tried to figure out her next move. "Whose are these?" I asked, keeping my voice as calm as possible. I honestly don't know how I managed to keep it together in that moment. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Then she laughed, a single, forced laugh that was far too loud for the situation and completely artificial. "Are you serious?" she said, her voice taking on an indignant tone. "You went through my stuff?" I didn't move, didn't blink, didn't give her any reaction to work with. I just stared at her, waiting for her to continue digging her own grave. She sighed dramatically and rolled her eyes as if I was being completely unreasonable. "It's nothing. Just a friend," she said dismissively. "It's a joke, really." I opened the card slowly and deliberately, making sure she could see exactly what I was doing. I held it out toward her so she could see the handwriting clearly. "Can't wait for Friday," I read aloud from the card. "That's tomorrow." Another pause. I noticed a slight shift in her stance, a barely perceptible change in her body language that told me she was recalculating her approach. Then she did what she always did when cornered. She redirected the conversation to make me the villain. "Jesus, you're being completely insane," she said, her voice rising with manufactured outrage. "You go through one stupid card and suddenly I'm cheating on you? This is ridiculous." "Are you?" I asked simply. The question hung in the air between us. The silence that followed stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Then she smiled. But it wasn't the smile I remembered from our early days together. This was a cruel, patronizing expression that I didn't recognize at all. "What if I am?" she said, the words cutting through the air like a blade. Something inside me cracked at that moment. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just a quiet fracture, the kind that changes the entire foundation of everything you thought you knew. I didn't yell, didn't throw anything, didn't demand more lies or explanations. I just nodded, accepting the truth that had been staring me in the face. "Okay," I said quietly. "Then I guess we're done." For the first time that night, her confident mask faltered. Just for a second, I saw something real cross her face, surprise, maybe even regret. But then the mask snapped right back into place. "Fine," she said, her voice cold and final. "Maybe we are." Just like that, she walked past me, those clicking heels echoing down the hallway as she disappeared from the kitchen. She moved, as if this entire confrontation had been beneath her dignity, as if I was the one who had ruined everything. I stood there in the kitchen for a long time after she left, watching the ring from my untouched coffee slowly expand on the marble counter like a spreading wound. She had walked out of the room, and something essential had left me along with her. It wasn't just love or trust that had died in that moment. It was something deeper, something final that I knew I'd never get back. I didn't sleep that night. The bedroom felt like a crime scene, heavy with the weight of what had just happened. Her expensive perfume still lingered in the sheets. That heavy, unmistakable scent that I now realized hadn't been meant for me in a very long time. I lay on my back staring at the ceiling, counting the quiet seconds as they passed, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on my chest like a slow suffocation. Every creak in the floorboards felt like another betrayal. Diana had retreated to the guest room without a word of explanation, without knocking on our bedroom door, without any attempt to salvage what we'd just destroyed. She simply vanished into the other side of the house, treating me like a roommate she'd accidentally slept with once and now regretted. Around 3 a.m., I heard her whispering on the phone. I couldn't make out the actual words, but the tone was unmistakable, soft, smug, and intimate in a way she hadn't spoken to me in years. The sound of her voice carried through the walls, and I knew without a doubt who she was talking to. I finally got up at 5 a.m. when the house was completely silent. Standing in the kitchen, I looked around at the leftovers of a life I didn't recognize anymore. There was the bowl of oranges she always insisted on keeping full, even though neither of us actually ate oranges. The stack of our wedding photos still sat on the shelf, mocking me with their forced joy and fake smiles. A fridge magnet from our honeymoon in Key West caught my eye, and I felt sick looking at it. But it was that damned coat closet that really got to me, the one where I'd found the gift bag. It felt like an open wound in the house, a constant reminder of how blind I'd been. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed proof, not for her, but for myself. I needed to know exactly how deep this betrayal went. I opened her laptop, and it was stupidly easy to get in. She used the same password for everything, her birthday, March 15th. I wish I could say I felt guilty about invading her privacy, but after finding that card and seeing her smirk, I felt nothing but cold curiosity. I didn't expect to find much. I didn't think she'd be careless enough to leave obvious evidence lying around. But I was wrong. She had been incredibly careless. There were emails, dozens of them, all from someone who signed his name as T, Tyler Hayes. He signed every message like an old-fashioned letter, almost poetic in his formality. There weren't any photos or explicit images, nothing crude like that, but the words themselves were devastating. "Jesus, I'm thinking of you constantly," one read. "You were incredible last night," said another. "I can't believe you're still with him, and you deserve to be more than someone's background noise." I scrolled through the messages until my eyes blurred. The emails went back months of deception and lies. Suddenly, all those weekend work trips made perfect sense. Her mysterious new trainer who she'd never bothered to name. All the missed dinners, the cold silences, the half-hearted kisses that felt like obligations rather than affection. I closed the laptop quietly, my hands shaking slightly. The truth hit me like a physical blow. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was living in a completely different relationship, one where she was fully present and engaged in ways she hadn't been with me in over a year. I went out to the garage and just sat there in my car with the engine off, hands resting on my knees, trying to control my breathing and not scream. The worst part wasn't the rage or even the grief. It was the relief. Relief that I finally knew the truth. Relief that the gaslighting was real and I hadn't been imagining things. Relief that I hadn't just let our marriage drift apart through neglect. She had actively pushed it over the edge. When I walked back inside at dawn, she was already in the kitchen pretending to make tea. She looked at me like I was the one who had disappeared without explanation, like I was the one who owed her answers. There was no apology in her expression, no shame, no acknowledgement of what had happened between us the night before. Instead, she looked at me with mild irritation. as if I was disrupting her morning routine. "Are we going to talk like adults now?" she said, her tone suggesting that I had been the one acting childishly. I looked at her. Really looked at this woman I thought I had loved. This was someone who used to hum while cooking dinner, who got nervous before every family gathering, who used to cry during Disney movies and sleep with one sock halfway off her foot. Now she stared at me like I was nothing more than an inconvenience in her carefully crafted fairy tale. "No," I said simply, "not anymore." Her lips curled into that familiar smirk I was beginning to hate. "Wow, real mature," she said sarcastically. With that, she walked away again. But this time I wasn't just passively watching her leave. This time, I started planning my next move. Saturday morning arrived, wrapped in a false sense of calm. Sunlight streamed through the blinds like nothing had fundamentally changed, but everything had shifted. I made scrambled eggs mechanically, put bread in the toaster, and poured coffee into 2 mugs out of pure habit. Then I caught myself and put 1 mug back in the cabinet. She wouldn't be joining me for breakfast anymore. Diana didn't emerge from the guest room until almost noon. When she finally appeared, she was wearing a navy blue hoodie that definitely wasn't mine. It was slightly oversized with a subtle logo stitched on the sleeve, probably his. She had that smug, post-storm glow about her, the kind of expression people wear when they've made peace with the wreckage they've created. I watched her pour herself a glass of apple juice, moving around the kitchen like she hadn't completely destroyed our life just 48 hours earlier. "You're being weird," she said, sitting at the table like it was just another casual weekend morning. She took a sip of her juice and continued. I said nothing happened. "Are you planning to sulk forever, or are we going to deal with this like rational adults?" She said the word deal, like she had stepped in something unpleasant and wanted to scrape it off her shoe as quickly as possible. "I found your emails," I said calmly. Her face didn't change, not even a flinch. There was no surprise, no panic, no attempt at denial. "I know everything," I continued. She tilted her head slightly, like I had spoken in a foreign language she was trying to translate. "So," she said. That single word hit me harder than anything else she could have said. Not a denial, not a tear, not even anger, just complete indifference. "So." That was her entire response to months of betrayal and lies. I looked at her and realized with perfect clarity that she was already gone. She had left our marriage a long time ago, probably before she'd even met Tyler. All this time, I had been desperately trying to hold together the structure of a hollowed-out relationship, trying to keep the walls standing while she had been quietly carving herself an escape tunnel. "I want a divorce," I said. She blinked once, slowly, and then smiled. It wasn't a smile of surprise or hurt. It was satisfaction, like I had finally said what she'd been waiting to hear. "I figured," she said simply. "Good. Good. Not I'm sorry. Not let's try to work this out. Not even I didn't mean for it to happen. Just good." She stood up and pulled out her phone, already thumbing through her contacts, probably texting him about this latest development. "I'll call my lawyer," she said matter-of-factly. There was no fight, no begging, no emotional breakdown. There wasn't even any bitterness, just cold, efficient business. It would have hurt less if she had screamed at me, if she had thrown something, if she had cried. But this clinical, composed corporate exit made me feel like I had just been terminated from a company I thought I had helped build. I didn't ask any more questions after that. I didn't ask how long the affair had been going on. I didn't ask why she had chosen him over me, and I didn't ask for any more explanations. I was done wanting more lies from her. That night, I walked past the guest room and heard her laughing on the phone, actually giggling like a teenager talking to her crush. She was whispering and being playful in a way I hadn't heard from her in years. The most telling part was that she didn't even bother to close the door. She didn't care that I could hear her, didn't care about my feelings, didn't care about maintaining even the pretense of respect for our dying marriage. I couldn't sleep again that night. I ended up sitting on the back porch with a beer in one hand and a printed copy of all those emails in the other. I'm not even sure why I had printed them out in the first place. Maybe I needed proof that it was all real. Maybe I needed some kind of catharsis. Or maybe I just wanted to feel the physical weight of her betrayal in my hands. I wanted to see the paper wrinkle under my grip, see the ink smear, see something tangible and real. That's when the full realization hit me like a truck. She had never actually respected me. Not from the very beginning of our relationship. I had completely mistaken her attention for genuine affection. She had never loved me. She had loved being adored by me. I was convenient, predictable, and safe for her. I provided stability and worship while she figured out what she really wanted. But once I stopped buying into her performance, once I started questioning the inconsistencies, I became expendable. I took those printed emails and walked back into the house. I placed them neatly on her pillow in the guest room, making sure she would see them as soon as she went to bed. She never said a single word about finding them there. She didn't even mention them the next day, didn't try to explain them away or justify what they contained. By then, I was already looking for a new place to live. I decided to let her keep the house. She could keep all the echoes and memories that came with it too. Sunday arrived, and the house was quieter than it had ever been. But it wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was the kind of silence that comes from things breaking just beyond the range of hearing. Foundations settling wrong, electrical wires humming with dangerous tension, structures that look fine on the surface but are rotting from within. I packed in complete silence, filling box after box with my belongings. T-shirts, old concert ticket stubs, books I'd been meaning to read, the cufflinks she had given me on our wedding day. I didn't take much and didn't want much. I only took the things that felt genuinely mine, things that weren't contaminated by memories of her. Diana floated through the house like a guest in an upscale hotel lobby. She didn't ask where I was planning to go, didn't ask if I had found an apartment, didn't ask if I had a plan for my life after this. She barely acknowledged my existence at all. Every few minutes, I would catch her glancing at her phone with a smirk she didn't even bother to hide anymore. Tyler was in there, I knew. The man with the expensive ties and poetic emails. The man who had somehow managed to pull her out of whatever stress or dissatisfaction she felt in our marriage. She didn't even try to hide her communication with him now. She had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter, and I could see multiple browser tabs. One was a Zillow listing for apartments described as perfect for couples. Another was a Spotify playlist titled T+D with a black heart emoji next to it. She was completely done pretending, and maybe she actually wanted me to see these things. Maybe it was her final way of twisting the knife, showing me just how thoroughly she had moved on while I was still processing the initial betrayal. The only time she spoke to me directly was when she walked past the bedroom doorway with a coffee mug in her hand. "Are you sure you're not overreacting?" she asked casually, not sarcastically, but with genuine puzzlement, as if I was the one with the problem. I stared at her for a long moment, and then I started laughing. It came out before I could stop it, the kind of deep, almost hysterical laugh you let out when the complete absurdity of a situation finally clicks into place. Her eyes narrowed with confusion and irritation. She clearly didn't like that I was laughing instead of suffering. "I gave you everything," I said, still chuckling. "My time, my loyalty, my whole damn self." "And I didn't ask for that," she replied with a casual shrug. "You chose to be that guy." That guy. As if loving your wife completely was some kind of character flaw. I didn't respond to that. There was nothing left to say. I zipped my last suitcase shut while she stood in the hallway with her arms crossed, her posture completely relaxed, like someone who was finally seeing the finish line of a race she'd been running for months. That's when I paused, because I suddenly remembered something that seemed both stupid and significant at the same time. Our anniversary was coming up, the 12th of next month. We had dinner reservations that I had made 3 months in advance at that quiet place by the bay with her favorite view of the water. I had even been planning to propose to her again, something symbolic to represent a second start for us. I'd bought a ring and hidden it in the top drawer of my desk, tucked underneath the warranty papers for our microwave. She didn't remember our anniversary was coming, but I did. And that small detail somehow crystallized everything for me. I left the house around 1 p.m., but I didn't drive straight to the new apartment I had lined up. Instead, I drove across town with a specific destination in mind. I was going to see him, Tyler Hayes. Thanks to her carelessly unprotected laptop and a couple of his more detailed emails, I knew exactly where he worked. It was an architecture firm in Midtown, one of those sleek, modern buildings made mostly of glass and sharp angles that were supposed to look impressive and cutting edge. I parked across the street and waited. I didn't have a plan, didn't have a weapon, didn't even have a clear idea of what I wanted to say to him. I just had this crystalline sense of clarity about what needed to happen next. At 1:30 p.m., he came out of the building. He was tall and clean-shaven, exactly the kind of guy who wore button-up shirts with the sleeves rolled perfectly to his elbows, like it was part of his personal brand. He looked like a walking cologne commercial. Everything about him was calculated to appear effortlessly sophisticated. I didn't approach him immediately. I just watched and waited. And then, right on cue, there she was. Diana walked up the sidewalk toward him, practically glowing with happiness. They didn't kiss in public, but their bodies leaned toward each other in a way that was too comfortable, too rehearsed, too intimate for a casual friendship. She said something that made him laugh, and he touched her back in a familiar, possessive way. She smiled at him in return, that real, genuine smile that I hadn't seen directed at me in years. It was the smile she used to give me when we first started dating, when everything was new and exciting and full of possibility. That's the moment I realized with absolute certainty that this wasn't just a fling or a moment of weakness. She was genuinely in love with him. And from the way he looked at her, maybe, just maybe, he wasn't quite as invested in her as she was in him yet. I waited until she turned to walk back to her car, then I stepped out of mine and crossed the street. "Tyler!" I called out. He turned around and squinted at me, clearly not recognizing who I was. "I'm Diana's husband," I said, keeping my voice calm and controlled. His eyes went wide for just a second, then narrowed as he processed what I had just said. "I think we should talk." I called his name and watched his entire body stiffen. He froze for a beat, then looked past me toward the house I had just left, then back at my face. His palms pressed into his hips like he was physically bracing himself for whatever storm was about to hit. "Mark," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. "Diana's husband." His eyes narrowed with recognition. "Right," he said, taking a step backward. "Listen, man, I didn't know—" "No," I interrupted, feeling my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "That she was married?" Tyler exhaled deeply, his shoulders dropping as if a weight had been lifted off them. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair and glanced down at the sidewalk. "She told me she was separated," he said quietly. "She said that she and her ex had split up 8 months ago." I blinked hard. Separated? 8 months? We had been together and living in the same house for the past 6 years. She had never mentioned separation to me, never even hinted that she wanted one. He shook his head, looking genuinely distressed. She said it was complicated, that she didn't want to drag her new life into her old one. His voice cracked slightly on those last words. New life. He suddenly looked older, more vulnerable, like I was seeing the real person underneath all that polished exterior for the first time. I took a deep breath. "Do you believe that story?" "I wanted to," he said, his shoulders slumping even further. When she smiled at me, I felt like I had been chosen for something special, or maybe rescued from something. I never asked too many questions because I didn't want to ruin whatever we had. But I should have. He turned and held up his phone. "I have all the texts, everything she told me about her situation. I can show you if you want." The sun glinted off his phone screen as he started to unlock it. But before he could hand it to me, a sudden roar sliced through the air. We both heard a car horn blaring long and insistently, and my pulse immediately started racing. I looked up to see Diana's car pulling into the parking lot across the street. She threw it into park and leaped out, storming toward us in those same clicking heels that had once sounded like promise, but now felt like an indictment. Tyler and I exchanged a look. Two men who had both fallen for the same elaborate lie, now standing side by side in the midday heat, about to face the woman who had deceived us both. Diana stopped a few feet away from us, her chest heaving from anger and exertion. She had her phone clutched tightly in her hand like a weapon. "You two think you've got me all figured out?" she said, her voice tight and furious. "You think you know everything about me?" She jabbed her phone at us aggressively, and I could see the screen clearly. There was a group chat labeled Jay's New Chapter at the top. In bold text, there was a message from her that read, "Phase 2 is live. Enjoy the fireworks." Below that message, I could see dozens of names, colleagues, mutual friends, and even my own brother's name was listed there. My stomach dropped as I realized the implications. She let her phone drop to her side and stared at both of us with complete contempt. "I told you both exactly what you wanted to hear," she said coldly. "I did what I had to do to get what I needed." Tyler's face went completely pale. He looked at me, then at her, then back at me again. I could see confusion and fury warring in his eyes as he tried to process what she was saying. I felt a cold spark ignite in my chest, a new understanding of betrayal that went far beyond what I had imagined. This wasn't just about an affair or even a double life. This was about systematic manipulation and deception on a level I hadn't thought possible. She straightened her back and placed her hands on her hips in a pose of complete defiance. "I'm done with secrets," she announced. "Phase 2 is exactly what it sounds like. You'll be hearing from my lawyer very soon, Mark. And you," she turned to Tyler with disgust, "don't bother calling me anymore. I'm already 5 steps ahead of both of you." Without another word, she turned on her heel and marched back to her car with the same clicking rhythm that had haunted me for weeks. She slid behind the wheel, and I could see her glaring at us in her rearview mirror with pure hatred. The engine roared to life, and she revved it once, making sure we understood that this was her dramatic exit. Then she sped off, tires squealing, before she had even properly shifted into drive. Silence stretched between Tyler and me, broken only by the faint echo of her car disappearing down the street. We both stood there feeling like the ground had shifted fundamentally beneath our feet. "I guess," Tyler finally said, his voice completely hollow. "We're in the same boat now." I nodded, my throat feeling thick with emotions I couldn't even name. "Yeah," I managed to say. "Looks like we are." We didn't speak again for a long minute. Tyler eventually sat down on the curb, resting his elbows on his knees and staring into the heat mirage rising off the asphalt. I remained standing with my arms crossed, trying to process what the hell had just happened. Phase 2. A group chat that included my brother. This wasn't just infidelity, this was a calculated strategy, and I had been nothing more than a pawn in whatever game she was playing. "I need to ask you something," I said, still watching the empty street where her car had vanished. Tyler didn't look up from the pavement. "Yeah? Did she ever mention my name to you? Ever talk about me like I was still around, still part of her life?" He rubbed his face with both hands and let out a bitter, hollow laugh. "She called you the ghost," he said quietly. "She said you were always gone, emotionally distant, completely wrapped up in your own world. She told me she was basically single in everything but name, that you two lived like roommates who barely spoke to each other." The words hit me like gravel in my gut, but I didn't flinch. I had expected something like this. "She lied to both of us," I said flatly. Tyler finally looked up at me, and I could see the pain and realization in his eyes. "I think she actually enjoyed it," he said. "The lying, the manipulation, the control. I think it was all a game to her." I didn't respond, but deep down I knew he was absolutely right. Diana hadn't been careless with her deception. She had been deliberately cruel. Every step, every omission, every smirk had been calculated. She wasn't just trying to escape our marriage, she was trying to dominate it, to win at a game where she was the only one who knew the rules. "She wasn't pulling strings just to get away," I said, more to myself than to Tyler. "She was pulling them to stay in control, to make sure she came out on top no matter what happened." Tyler nodded grimly. "And every player in her game was completely disposable. When I got back to the house, I found Diana's bedroom door locked. I knocked once, needing to retrieve some of my things. 'Go away!' she called through the door. 'I need the laptop,' I said, knowing there might be more evidence I could use. 'You'll get it in court,' she replied coldly. I walked away from the door. The truth was, I didn't need the laptop anymore. I already had everything I needed to move forward. The next day, I called my lawyer and told him everything. The affair, the messages, that cruel smirk, the group chat, and Tyler's testimony about her lies. He listened patiently to the whole sordid story, taking notes as I spoke. When I finished, he asked, "Did you two sign a prenup when you got married?" "We never signed one," I said. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Well," he said with satisfaction, "that's actually very good news for you." The divorce process started moving faster than I had expected. But Diana wasn't going to go quietly. She served me with her own countersuit before I had even signed the first set of papers. She was alleging emotional neglect, abandonment, and something she called manipulative silence in her filing. She wasn't just planning to walk away from our marriage. She wanted to drag me through hell with her, to make sure I suffered as much as possible in the process. But here's where she had seriously miscalculated. She thought I would break under the pressure. What she didn't realize was that once you're already standing in the ashes of your life, you stop fearing the fire. There was nothing left for her to burn. I responded through my lawyer with all the evidence I had gathered. The emails, the text messages, the photos, everything that documented her affair and deception. Tyler even agreed to submit an affidavit detailing how she had lied to him about our marriage. I didn't ask him to do it, he offered voluntarily. "She played me too," he said when he called to tell me about his decision. "Let's end this thing once and for all." When Diana found out about Tyler's affidavit, she absolutely exploded. She started showing up at my new apartment unannounced, banging on the door and demanding to be let in. She sent me long, vicious text messages that swung wildly from begging to blaming, sometimes within the same paragraph. In one breath, she would accuse me of ruining her life and destroying her reputation. In the next, she would threaten to reclaim everything that had been stolen from her. But nothing had been stolen from her. She had handed it all away piece by piece, choice by choice. The real twist in this whole mess came from my brother. It turned out that he had known about Diana's affair for over a year. She had been feeding him carefully crafted stories about our marriage, painting me as a neglectful, emotionally absent husband who had driven her into someone else's arms. He never told me any of this because he said he didn't want to interfere in our marriage. He thought it wasn't his place to get involved. After I found out about his involvement in her group chat and his months of silence, I stopped talking to him entirely. Some betrayals cut in ways that are different from others, and this felt like a knife in the back from someone I had trusted completely. The divorce hearing was finally scheduled, and I circled the date on my calendar like a countdown to something clean and final. It felt like I was marking the day when I could finally close this chapter of my life and start writing a new one. Tyler texted me the day after we filed all the paperwork. "She always talked about wanting control over everything," he wrote. "I just thought she meant control over her career and her own life." I replied simply, "She never stopped performing. Every single day was a show for her." What Diana never understood was that by the time we reached the courthouse, I no longer needed her apologies, her explanations, or even her signature on the divorce papers. I was already gone, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. I had moved on while she was still trying to choreograph her grand finale. The courthouse was colder than I had expected. Not physically, but the atmosphere itself felt sterile and emotionless. It was dry and clinical, like the building had long since stopped caring about the kinds of lives that passed through its doors. The air smelled like old paper and recycled ventilation, the kind of place where promises go to die quietly without fanfare. Diana arrived 25 minutes late, which was almost certainly on purpose. She stepped into the hallway like she was walking down a runway, wearing a tight blazer and sporting a fresh blowout. Those same stilettos that now felt like armor clicked against the marble floor as she moved. She didn't look at me once, not even a glance. She just breezed past me like I was a janitor and she was the CEO of someone else's version of justice. Her lawyer was a shark in expensive heels, all sharp angles and predatory confidence. My lawyer, on the other hand, was older and quieter, the kind of person who doesn't need to posture because he just waits patiently for the truth to speak for itself. I like that about him. When the judge entered the courtroom, we all stood. Papers were shuffled, names were read aloud, and the formality of it all almost made the whole thing feel less real, like we were participating in some kind of elaborate legal theater. Then the testimonies began, and Diana went first. Her voice was calm and practiced as she painted herself as the abandoned wife. She claimed that I had checked out emotionally long before her affair ever began, that she had tried to reach out to me dozens of times over the years, but was always met with cold silence and indifference. She described feeling like a ghost in her own marriage, invisible and unloved. I watched her lie with the same smooth confidence she had always possessed. Not once did she mention Tyler by name during her testimony. Not once did she admit to having an affair in clear terms. Instead, she danced around the truth like a seasoned performer, using carefully chosen phrases like misunderstood connection and emotional drift to describe what had happened between us. When it was my turn to testify, I didn't raise my voice or get emotional. I simply read from the evidence I had gathered. I read her emails aloud, word for word. I passed the judge printed copies of the entire email thread between her and Tyler, including the messages where she described our anniversary as dead weight and joked about getting me to fund her next chapter without my knowledge. The judge's eyebrow twitched slightly as he read through the documents, but his expression remained professionally neutral. Diana's lawyer objected, claiming that the emails had been taken out of context and didn't represent the full picture of their client's emotional state. But there was no context that could explain away months of calculated deception. Then I submitted Tyler's affidavit. He had written it out in meticulous detail, dates, places, locations where they had met, and most importantly, exactly what Diana had told him about our marriage. He documented how she had misled him about our relationship status, how she had manipulated both of us simultaneously, and how she had constructed elaborate lies to maintain her double life. Diana didn't flinch when the affidavit was read aloud, but she refused to look up from the table in front of her. Her hands remained folded, her posture remained perfect, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Then came what my lawyer called the smoking gun. The group chat titled, Jay's New Chapter. My lawyer had subpoenaed her phone records, and Diana's digital communications lit up like a beacon of betrayal. There were photos she had sent to friends, messages where she openly trashed me and our marriage, and voice notes where she mocked the entire divorce process like it was some kind of game she was winning. When the court recessed for lunch, Diana followed me into the hallway. Her composure finally cracked just a little bit. "Are you proud of yourself?" she hissed at me, her voice tight with fury. "Dragging me through this public humiliation? Making a complete spectacle out of your pathetic little sob story?" I turned to face her, keeping my voice completely calm. "You did all of this to yourself." She smirked, and for a moment I saw a flash of the old Diana, the one who always believed she was the smartest person in any room. "It won't matter in the end," she said confidently. "I'll land on my feet. I always do." "I'm sure you will," I replied evenly. "That's what people like you do, right? Burn everyone around you and then call it evolution." She stepped closer to me, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You think people are going to see you as the victim in all this? You think anyone's actually going to care about your side of the story?" I leaned in slightly. "I don't care anymore who sees what or who believes what version of events. I cared about you. I fought for our marriage. But now I wouldn't lift a finger to save you from the fire you've set for yourself." We went back into the courtroom after that exchange, and there were no more words between us. The judge ruled in my favor on every major point. Diana walked out of the courthouse without waiting for the final paperwork to be processed. She didn't look back, not once, as she disappeared through the heavy glass doors. As I was leaving the building, I saw Tyler waiting on a bench outside. He stood up when he saw me approaching and gave me a simple nod. No words needed. Just a moment of understanding between two people who had survived the same storm. We were like two ghosts of the same wreckage, finally able to walk away from the ruins we had both been trapped in. The final paperwork was completed 3 weeks later, quietly and without any fanfare. There was no dramatic conclusion, no celebration, no sense of victory. Just a simple email that appeared in my inbox with the subject line, "Judgment entered, divorce granted." My freedom came wrapped in a PDF attachment, clinical and matter-of-fact. I didn't celebrate, at least not right away. There wasn't any joy in the moment, just a sense of clean, undemanding air around me. For the first time in years, I could breathe without feeling like I owed someone else my breath, without constantly calculating how my words or actions might be twisted or used against me. Diana didn't reach out to me directly after the divorce was finalized, but she made sure I heard from her indirectly. The first contact came from our mutual friend Lauren, someone I hadn't spoken to in months. She texted me late one night, clearly uncomfortable with the message she was delivering. "She's been telling people you tried to ruin her financially," Lauren wrote. "She's saying you weaponized the court system against her. Are you okay?" I replied simply, "She ruined herself." Then came an email, but not from Diana. It was from Tyler. The subject line read, "You were right," and the body of the message was brief but telling. "She's completely unraveling," he wrote. "She told me I was a mistake just 2 days after the court hearing. Called me a dead end with abs, if you can believe that. I've cut all contact with her. I just thought you should know. She's not building anything new or positive. She's just burning through people, one relationship at a time." I sat there reading that email over and over again, not out of vindication or satisfaction, but because it confirmed something I had quietly suspected all along. Diana didn't actually love anyone. Not me, not Tyler, maybe not even herself. She was just trying to win at a game where only she knew the rules, and every other player was completely disposable to her. A few days later, I ran into her by accident at the grocery store in the frozen foods section. She was wearing a hoodie with no makeup, her hair pulled back into a messy bun. When she saw me, her eyes darted away immediately, and she turned down another aisle too quickly, like she was trying to escape. But not before I caught that brief moment of hesitation, that flicker of something that might have been shame or embarrassment. I didn't chase after her or call out her name. I just continued with my shopping. But something unexpected happened in that moment. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no hatred, no need for closure or final words. Just complete emotional neutrality. She didn't get the satisfaction of seeing me still broken or bitter. She didn't get an apology or a dramatic confrontation or proof that I was still devastated by what she had done. And maybe that was the first real victory I'd had in this entire mess. Later that night, I went through my storage unit and pulled out the last box I had been avoiding. The one with the engagement ring I had planned to give her for our anniversary. I had bought it months before everything fell apart, thinking it would symbolize a fresh start for us. I drove down to the bay where we used to walk together during happier times. I opened the small velvet box and tossed the ring into the dark water. It sank without even making a splash, disappearing completely like it had never existed at all, just like she had disappeared from my life, just like we had disappeared from each other. As I walked back to my car, I felt a quiet understanding settle over me. Sometimes you don't get justice in the traditional sense. Sometimes you don't get the apology you deserve or the closure you think you need. Sometimes you just get the chance to walk away and start over, and that has to be enough, B. It had been almost 2 months since the divorce was finalized. The house had been sold, and we had split up the furniture and belongings without too much drama. My name was now on a lease for a new place, a smaller apartment with worn floorboards and crooked cabinet doors that didn't quite close properly. And I absolutely loved it. Not because it was perfect or luxurious, but because it was completely mine. There were no echoes of someone else's lipstick stains on wine glasses, no lies hiding behind closet doors, no constant tension crackling through the air. It was a space where I could breathe freely and think clearly for the first time in years. My phone buzzed on a rainy Wednesday afternoon while I was making lunch. It was an unknown number, so I ignored it. A few minutes later, it buzzed again with the same number, and then a text message appeared. "We need to talk just once, I swear, please," the message read. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I paced around my small apartment with my hands in my pockets, feeling my heart do that old war drum rhythm that I thought I had finally buried for good. 5 minutes passed, and then another text arrived from the same number. "I owe you something." Against my better judgment, curiosity won out over caution. I replied simply, "Where?" She chose a public place for our meeting, a small cafe on the edge of Midtown. It was neutral ground, somewhere with no wine glasses to slam down dramatically, no bedroom doors to storm out of, no personal history to complicate the conversation. I arrived early and sat in a corner table with my back to the wall, watching every person who came through the door like they might be part of a movie where I already knew the ending. Diana walked in 8 minutes late. Of course she was late, but this time there was no performance involved. She wasn't wearing lipstick or fake smiles, and there was no sharp clicking of heels against the floor. She looked small, and I don't mean physically. She looked spiritually diminished, as if all her sharpness and calculated confidence had been dulled by recent events, and she hadn't quite noticed the change yet. She sat down across from me at the small table. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, her voice softer and more genuine than I had heard it in months, maybe years. I said nothing, just waited for her to continue. She looked out the window for a moment, then back at me. "I know you probably don't believe me, and I understand why you wouldn't, but I never actually planned to hurt you the way I did." I continued to wait in silence. She shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "I thought I wanted freedom and power, something that would make me feel alive again. But it was never really about you personally. It was never about you as a person." "That's exactly the problem," I said quietly. She looked like she wanted to cry, but the tears didn't come. Maybe she had already done all her crying in private, or maybe she simply didn't have that kind of emotion left in her anymore. "I completely lost control of everything," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tyler's gone. Most of my friends don't return my calls anymore, and my job situation is getting shaky. I thought I could control all the moving pieces, manage everyone's expectations and emotions, but it turns out I'm not very good at playing God with other people's lives." I stared at her across the table, letting the silence stretch between us. "I'm not asking you to fix anything or take me back," she added quickly. "I just wanted to tell you that you didn't deserve what I put you through. Any of it." For a brief, fragile moment, I actually believed her. The sincerity in her voice seemed real, and I could see genuine regret in her eyes. But I also understood something deeper and more important. Apologies can't untangle a noose once it's been tied. They come too late, long after the rope has already left its permanent mark. "I know I didn't deserve it," I said finally. She looked relieved, like she had needed to hear that acknowledgement from me. Not forgiveness exactly, but just a simple recognition that what she had done was wrong. But she didn't get what she was really hoping for. Some kind of absolution or reconciliation. I stood up from the table. "I hope you find whatever it is you're actually chasing," I said, and then I walked out of the cafe. I didn't leave because I wanted to hurt her or make some kind of dramatic statement. I left because I had already moved on, already healed from the wounds she had inflicted, and there was simply nothing left to discuss between us. It's strange how quietly the world continues to turn after your entire life explodes. The sun still rises every morning, trash still gets picked up on Wednesdays, and people still honk impatiently at green lights like they're running late for something that actually matters. I didn't think I would make it to this place, to this side of the emotional wreckage. I thought I would stay permanently twisted up in the pain, stuck somewhere between what I thought Diana and I were and what we had actually become. I expected to remain bitter and broken indefinitely. But the truth is, Healing doesn't look like fireworks or sudden epiphanies. It's much quieter and more gradual than that. It looks more like this. I deleted her phone number from my contacts. I got a dog, a rescue mutt who doesn't judge my past or expect me to be anyone other than who I am right now. I learned how to cook something more sophisticated than instant ramen. I laughed genuinely at a dumb joke a stranger made while we were both waiting in line at the coffee shop. These are little things, real things, simple moments that add up to something like contentment. The scar that Diana left behind is still there, and I can feel it sometimes. It aches when I pass our old grocery store, when a familiar song comes on the radio, or when someone asks if I'm seeing anyone and I hesitate a little longer than I should before answering. But scars don't actually hurt. They just remind you of where you've been. They teach you lessons about what to avoid and what to value. What Diana taught me, more than anything about betrayal or anger, was clarity. Love without genuine respect is completely hollow. Trust without truth is nothing but elaborate theater. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can say to someone is absolutely nothing at all. Tyler moved to another city, from what I heard through mutual acquaintances. He's doing okay, apparently. We haven't stayed in touch, but we shook hands the last time we saw each other. A silent truce between two survivors of the same emotional disaster. I don't think either of us regrets walking away from Diana's chaos when we did. As for Diana herself, I honestly don't know how she's doing now. I don't check up on her, don't ask mutual friends about her, don't need to know. Some part of her probably still thinks I hate her, that I sit around plotting comebacks or wishing terrible things would happen to her. But she's completely wrong about that. I don't hate Diana. Hate requires you to dedicate valuable space in your heart to someone, and she simply doesn't live there anymore. What she never understood, what she never could understand, is that forgiveness isn't really about the other person at all. It's about choosing peace over the need for permission to move on. It's about walking away without requiring justice or revenge, because freedom itself is justice. So if you're reading this story, if you've been lied to or left behind or made to question your own worth, please hear me. You are not broken. You were just honest in a world that sometimes rewards performance over authenticity. You were real in a situation that demanded you to be fake. Let them go. Let yourself begin again. Because once I finally did that, once I truly let go and allowed myself to start over, I found myself again. And that person, it turns out, was worth saving all along.